All right, so what we're going to talk about today is primary versus secondary sources in history. So you can see here, I've Google search, what's a primary source? There's a lot of different ways to try to explain that, and it can get a little complicated or confusing, and there's going to be some follow-on videos. But as a sixth grader, you should just think of a primary source as somebody who's there. They're telling you about something that they saw or they experienced or they were part of, right? So that's the definition of a primary source. The secondary source is everything else, right? I'm going to teach you this year about ancient history. I'm a secondary source because I was not alive in ancient Rome. I know I might seem really old, but I was not alive during ancient Rome or ancient Egypt or Mesopotamia or the Stone Age times. I am a secondary source. However, I use primary sources to try to learn about those places. So while I can only tell you what I've read about ancient Rome as a secondary source, I can tell you about Tacitus, who is a primary source, and what he wrote about ancient Rome, right? Or while I'm personally interested in history and I like to learn about World War II, I cannot tell you about World War II because I wasn't alive. However, my grandparents fought in World War II. And while they're no longer alive, they were primary sources because they were there at the event. So that's the difference. Now, the second thing is, why do we study these things? Uh, there's a really good reason that we study these things, right? Uh, Primary sources are what historians, real historians, good real historians should focus on because they know they were there. Those primary sources are generally pretty accurate. So with the Titanic, when the Titanic sank in 1912, a lot of the survivors from the Titanic said this ship broke in half. It pitched out of the water and it broke in half. And it turns out through a whole bunch of studying, it didn't stick this high out of the water, most likely. And there were a lot of people who survived that said, well, I saw what I saw. However, when they got to New York, a lot of experts said that's not possible. We don't believe that that's true. These primary sources are wrong. Well, when Robert Ballard finds the Titanic in the 1980s, guess what? It's broken in half. And so I say all that to just say, why do we look at primary sources? Because they were there, right? I can tell you what I've learned about things from World War II, but I don't even have 1/1000th of the knowledge of somebody who was actually there and experienced it. So we always look for primary sources, and I'll share a couple videos and activities with you as we try to figure out what's a primary source. Just remember, it's somebody who was there. What's a secondary source? Everything else.